Hello and welcome to this edition of CRATV, where we talk about politics, policy, and politicians, all from a conservative perspective, right here in the great state of California. So please take a moment, like and share the program so that your friends can join in the conversation. Also, please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And in the case of YouTube and Facebook, make sure you hit the notification button. That way you can get notifications as soon as we go live, and you can participate in the live chat as the program is going on. Also want to remind you that we do have an event coming up. That's right. We have the 2020 annual CRA convention. It's going to be taking place in Visalia, California at the Lamplighter Inn. It's only going to be one day this year. It's going to be Saturday, August 29th, 2020. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to have a lot of really good businesses going to get done there. There's going to be some people there that you need to meet if you want to be an activist in the state of California. The directions are right there for you to get more information, or you can follow the link in the description to this video in order to register for the event. So folks, make sure, if you can be, make sure that you're there. Also, if you are not a member of the California Republican Assembly, it's vital that you join today. Folks, California Republican Assembly is the oldest grassroots organization, conservative grassroots organization in the state of California. We have been successful for generations in helping to elect conservatives to school board, to local city council, all the way up to President of the United States. In fact, Ronald Reagan called the California Republican Assembly the conscience of the Republican Party. But folks, we're only successful because we have your support. So if you're not a member, you need to become a member. All you got to do is follow the join link in the description of this video, and it'll tell you where and how you can become a member. Folks, it is that simple. Please remember to become a member of the California Republican Assembly. All right, let's get on to today's topic. You know, there's a lot of stuff that's going on today. And as we can see, whether it's from Black Lives Matter or it's the Democratic Party or it's Antifa, we can see that politics they're kind of changing, and how they work is kind of changing here in these United States. And I think we've seen it even more here in the state of California because we've been seeing it longer, I think, than the rest of the country. But really, the rest of the country is starting to really see the impact of, I'll just put it this way, the impact of Marxism, all right, on our politics. And the takeover really of the Democratic Party and of liberalism by a Marxist ideology. And there was recently an article that was brought to my attention by a local radio talk show host. And it was, after reading the article, is something that I just had to bring to your attention, had to talk to you about. And number one, so that we could kind of go over it and bring, kind of let you know what's going on. But number two, so that you can read it for yourself and get really a lot of good detailed information from it. But number three, we could also talk about what do we do about it, right? What do we do about it? And by the way, the guy who wrote the article, his name is Yoram Hazani, and the article is called The Challenge of Marxism. That's right, it's called The Challenge of Marxism. Now, in order for us to understand Marxism, I think we have to start off by talking about the fundamentals of Marxism. What actually is Marxism? So, that's the first thing he gets into, so that's the first thing we're going to get into. So let's talk about the fundamentals of Marxism. All right, let's start with oppressor, oppressed. All right, what does it mean, oppressor, oppressed? So fundamentally, what this idea is that Marxism teaches that automatically people divide, and they divide into oppressors and oppressed. Now, I'm not saying that's what I believe. I'm saying that's what Marx teaches. In other words, one group will eventually, at one point or another, start to take advantage of the other group. They'll start to become more successful. They'll start to do however you'd want to deem oppressive, right? They will control the government. They'll start to restrict the rights. All of those things will start to happen as the oppressor starts to exploit the oppressed. And that's a fundamental tenet of Marxism. And you can see a lot of that now as we talk about how we've basically divided into, in this particular case, with Black Lives Matter, it's being black. So either you're black or you're not, or you're minority or you're not. So, but the way in which it's divided is that if you're not black, then you are the oppressor. And obviously black people in this particular case are the oppressee or the oppressed, right? If you are, or in general, it's people of color. But that's a large part of what it is that they're pushing as a part of their ideology. The second thing to note is this false consciousness. Now, what is this false consciousness? They teach that, whether it's politicians, whether it's businessmen, employers, or even whether it's employees or citizens, this false consciousness where he talks about how people are oppressed and they don't even know it, right? So in other words, if you go to work for somebody and they pay you a salary or a wage for your work, right? They are basically getting in. Once again, this is Marxist ideology, not Craig's ideology. But you are being taken advantage of because they're making money. They're making a profit off of your labor. So you're being exploited or oppressed and you don't even know it. And the employer at the same time is oppressing you and they don't even know it, regardless of the fact of whether or not they're providing you with a living to take care of your family, whether they're providing you with health care, whatever it is. In the eyes of Marxism, you are being oppressed and they are the oppressor. That's just how it is. That's once again the teaching, one of the fundamental teachings of Marxism. Now, they also teach the revolutionary reconstitution of society. Now, this is important to understand because this is where, to a certain degree, a level of liberalism and Marxism start to diverge. See, liberalism and liberal ideology, the idea is, or a liberal democracy or a liberal form of government, the idea is that different ideologies compete. We may group, but different groups compete in order to determine who is going to govern, right? With the understanding that there's an acceptance of the legitimacy of the other entity should they win, right? Because they know that eventually the other side is going to mess up, they're going to do bad, and eventually they're going to get back into power and they're going to have the opportunity to implement policies that they want. Under Marxism, the only way to undo this is through revolution, is by tearing down the entire governmental system, right? Revolution is Marxism. Marxism cannot exist, cannot be fully realized if it is not accompanied with revolution, often, violent revolution. All right, so that's an important note. And then finally, the total disappearance of class antagonisms. So the whole goal of the revolution is to get rid of this antagonism between the classes, whether it's between races, whether it's between religions, whether it's between socioeconomic classes. Their goal is to eliminate those antagonisms. And they say that once the revolution happens, then that class warfare, that class warfare will basically end. Wow. Okay, so tell me you cannot see a lot of this information being included there today, right? You see people, whether in Black Lives Matter, one of their fundamental tenets is they want to tear down our society. They want to not just get rid of our governmental, our political governmental system. They even want to tear down the nuclear family, right? The foundation of our society, of this country, the foundation of our society, the family, the mother, father, children. They want to tear that down. So obviously that's clearly obviously something that they are engaged in today. And then once again, and they do so with the promise of once we've done that, well, then there will be no sexism. There will be no racism. There will be no capitalism. Everyone will live in a harmonious society once we've destroyed or eliminated the current governmental structure. All right, so those are the fundamental tenets of Marxism. So let's talk about why doesn't Marxism just disappear? Because the problem is Marxism has never worked anywhere, right? It's never actually worked. Just think Cuba, Venezuela, China, Russia. I mean, in the end, it eventually collapses unto itself. Let me clarify. First, it turns into it turns into a dictatorship. It's run clearly by despots, and they wind up eventually, despite the promise of people having all sorts of rights, eventually people lose all of those rights. They lose every fundamental right that they have. In fact, Marxism has never, ever, 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 ever worked. but yet it doesn't disappear. It continues to pop up. So why is that? Well, let's talk about that. The first is liberals and conservatives underestimate the attraction of Marxism. Now, keep in mind that both conservatism and liberalism are based upon this idea of liberty, of everybody being equal, although conservatism, it's probably a little bit more about people being equal. It's about individual responsibility and individual rights, and about everybody being created equal. The problem with that is that it's real easy to argue that, well, so how come everybody can't just, it's too easy to argue that because we don't have equal outcomes, and that's the thing that they focus on. They want in Marxism equal outcomes. And because we don't have equal outcomes, well, then everyone must not be equal. And in the end, what they argue for is equal outcomes. But you and I both know that just really doesn't work, because if you give two people the exact same knowledge, information, and resources, you're going to have two different results depending on the individual that you give it to, or depending on the society that you put that information into. We both know that I'm sorry, but while we are all created equal, we don't all have equal levels of effort. We don't all have equal levels of moral value. We are very, very different. So we don't have equal outcome. Well, for those who want to preach the fairness and equality, or the new phrase nowadays is equity, right? In order to have equity, well, then we've got to then force equal outcomes. Well, to people who work hard, to people who put in extra level of energy and whatnot, who believe that they should be rewarded for their individual efforts, well, to them, that doesn't make sense. That's not fair. But to people who aren't willing to do that, to people who just want it handed to them, well, of course it's attractive. The idea of just doing absolutely nothing and having everything handed to you, and you know that you'll have the same outcome as other individuals. That's the promise. It's not the actual outcome, but the promise is of equal outcomes. Now, liberal societies are particularly vulnerable to Marxism. So why are liberal societies more susceptible to it? Because liberal society in general is more geared towards utilizing the power of government to try and create these equitable outcomes, right? In other words, through government policy, whether it's redistribution of wealth, whether it's through regulation and law, their goal, liberalism believes that they can create that equity, right? But it's not necessarily the same way. In other words, they don't believe that you have to go through revolution and destroy the entire form of government. They just believe that, hey, our ideas are going to win out, and so when we get elected, we're going to go ahead and implement these policies. But the problem is, it doesn't always work out that way. Okay, our inherent tendency, we have an inherent tendency to divide into classes. Folks, I know that many of you out there are saying, no, well, I don't do that. But you know what? All of us do. It happens, right? People tend to gravitate towards the familiar. That's just the way human nature works. And because we tend to gravitate towards that division, it opens the door for Marxism to plant seeds of distrust, to plant seeds of once again going back to the oppressor-oppressed relationship. See, you may not necessarily see it as a negative where you have people who work hard and people who don't. Right? People who have ingenuity and want to own their own businesses and are entrepreneurs, and those who are not. Well, the problem is that every time one of those groups starts to succeed, whether it's through government, gaining seats in government, greater control over government, or economically, right? Doesn't matter. Marxists then have a thing that they can point to and say, that's happening because you're oppressed. So they're succeeding because you're being oppressed. And eventually, over time, people begin to believe that, right? And then you have the liberals who are maybe on the success side who are believing, well, I've obviously gotten this because, well, I've oppressed them. Thus, white guilt. Right? That's exactly what it is. It's literally when you have these liberals who are bowing on their knees or getting down on one knee and apologizing for white privilege. That is an example of, this is a great example of what it is that they're doing. It's once again, it's part of that. It's they're acknowledging, yes, we've divided, and yes, I have oppressed you. And so hopefully by me acknowledging that, well, then we're all going to be good. And that leads us once again into the last thing, the oppressors versus oppressed. In other words, it creates that divide. Once again, it opens the door for them to be able to point to that divide and say, you are the oppressed and you are the oppressors. And we need to come against the oppressors, right? That's why it doesn't just disappear. Because by the way, if I want to just sum it down into just a real nutshell, it's a lot easier to blame someone else for your lot in life and where you are. Than it is for you to accept the fact that where you are is a result of the decisions that you made. You may not be able to control where you start, but you are able to control what you do with what you have. Just saying. All right, moving right along. So then, why doesn't Marxism just disappear? Right? Actually, I already touched on that one. Marxist playbook. Now, this is the one that's really going to seem familiar to you guys. Check this out now. So first of all, it starts with promoting class warfare. Right now, we know the liberals have been doing this for decades, right? They promote class warfare because they want you to be envious. In the state of California, for example, there's a reason why the majority of our tax revenue comes from top income earners. Right? There's a reason why, and that's because in California, they realized that while Californians would not approve of taxes in general, they don't want to be taxed, but they will approve the idea of you taxing them, whoever they are, whether it's the rich, whether it's smokers, whether it's people who drink, whether it's gun owners, they're okay with you taxing them as long as you don't tax me. And they want to talk about how we're going to take money from them in order to make your life better. That is promoting class warfare, right? Black Lives Matter. That's exactly, once again, what it's about. It's about saying, okay, well, we're going to take this. We want to end capitalism. We want to end your form of government because there are people who are succeeding and people who are not. Now, I'm just going to be real with you. You look at a lot of the statistics that are out there relating to the challenges facing the black community in these United States, and I will tell you that a lot of them are correlative, right? In other words, there's a lot of things that are a lot of statistics that are correlative, meaning A and B are both happening or are in line, right? But they're not necessarily causative, meaning A does not cause B, meaning that a lot of these things that are happening are not because, well, people are black. It's just not. But when one looks at things like fatherlessness, when one looked in particular, I mean, to me, the number one issue in the black community is single parent, is children growing up in single parent households. The very fact that if you grow up in a single parent household, you are much more likely to grow up in poverty. You're much more likely to be a latchkey kid. You're much more likely to wind up in prison. You're much more likely to wind up on drugs or a member of a gang. You name it. It's much more likely for children in single parent households. 70% black children are growing up in single parent households. Once again, it's all about that. It's all about promoting that class warfare. Instead of just saying, look, why don't we address the issue? Let's address the class. We'll say it's because you're black, not because of a societal issue that is something that is aside from race that we can, in particular, can address. Now, the next thing that they do is they delegitimize and silence opposition. Now, folks, this is cancel culture. This is, by very definition, cancel culture. In other words, we're going to delegitimize the other side. And this is, by the way, and I know that Donald Trump a lot of they blame what this stuff that they blame on President Donald Trump. But let's just be real. This was stuff that was happening well before President Donald Trump. They were the ones who said that the reelection of President George W. Bush would be like reelecting, would be tantamount to electing Bull Connor. They called him today's Bull Connor. They said that reelecting him was tantamount to dragging a black man in chains behind a truck. That's what the NAACP said. They ran those commercials. That's what Charlie Rangel said. Once again, their whole thing is that instead of addressing the legitimacy of the policies of conservatives, they've always attacked the personage. They've always attacked the person, not the policy. And the thing is that President Trump came around, and President Trump, because he spent a lot of time with liberals. He spent a lot of time with Democrats, in particular running a business in New York. So he understood and knew their tactics, and he to a certain degree used it right against them and attacked them in the same way that they have traditionally attacked conservatives or Republicans. And now all of a sudden they want to blame him. They want to call him hateful. They want to call him racist. And by the way, just so you know, I've done this multiple times. I have asked and put out there for many of the liberals and Democrat-minded folks that I know in social media and in media in general, and ask them to tell me what policies the president has pushed, that he has promoted, that he has passed that are in fact racist. And so far, I've not gotten one real answer. But once again, what they realize is it's not about the policies. It's about once they call him racist, now he's been delegitimized, right? Now all of a sudden, he really doesn't matter. We can go after him for whatever it is that we want to go after him for. And we don't really have to have facts because once again, he's been delegitimized. So, and by the way, then from that, you go from the delegitimization to the silencing. Things like censoring by Facebook and censoring by YouTube and by Google, right? You have the fact that people from conservative perspectives many times can't even run ads on many of these social media platforms. Across the board, even the mainstream media has taken to the point where when you read the news today in the mainstream media, it is very slanted and very, once again, they delegitimize anything conservative or Republican without even addressing the substance of their issues, right? The next thing that they do is they institute policies that control the thoughts and eliminates the rights of people. See, ultimately what they realize is that they can't get people to just go along. So what they realize they need to do is they need to use the force of government, right? They use the force of government in order to make people do what it is that they want. They start setting up things like hate speech, right? Now, if you leave it to Facebook or if you leave it to the Southern Poverty Law Center or any of these left-wing groups that hate conservatives or hate conservative ideology, anything conservative is considered hate. And by calling it hate and then using this nonprofit group that's supposed to point out hate to call it hate, now once again you are able to silence and muzzle them. And then on top of it, you're able to then pass laws restricting the rights of individuals. This is nowhere more evident than when it comes to dealing with issues of the Second Amendment. I've lobbied the Second Amendment for a long time. And what I found is that the facts don't matter. The facts don't matter when it comes to the Second Amendment. All that matters is guns. Most of the people who write anti-gun policy don't know guns. They don't know gun technology. They don't know gun policy. They don't know the gun industry. What they do know is that they want to restrict the right to keep and bear arms. What they do know is they don't like guns. So they institute policies to control the rights of individuals, right? And then they expand upon those policies. Once they've taken away one right, then they expand it to restrict other rights. You guys, I know I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. I'm just tying it all. Hopefully I'm tying it all together and helping you to see what's going on. Okay. And then call for the destruction of the current political system. I point to none other than Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter, the number one cause that they have. Think about it. They want to defund the police. They want to take away. They want to. Let me use the euphemistic term. They want to reimagine policing. Right? They want to eliminate our political system. They want to get rid of the Electoral College, for example, which protects smaller states in this country, which was put there specifically to prevent from the tyranny of the majority. Right? But they want to eliminate that. There's item after item after item, and what they want is direct democracy. Right? They want direct democracy because they want governance by the mob. That's what they want. Right? And we all know true democracy is two wolves and a sheep deciding what to have for lunch. The founding fathers never wanted direct democracy. They knew the dangers of it. They understood the dangers of it. But once again, they want to undermine our entire political system. They want to destroy the entire thing. But see, where liberals and the Marxists come apart is liberals just think, well, let's just get rid of all the conservatives and then we'll reshape the government the way we want. And in actuality, the Marxists just want to tear the whole thing down. They just want to tear the whole thing down. And they don't want a democratic form of government. They want to use the democratic form of government with liberal tendencies to then tear down the entire system, to cause the system to implode unto itself. That is what their goal is. Now, how can we stop modern day Marxism? All right. Now, I think this is an important one. This was not in the article, but these are some things that I just thought of, and there may be more things that you guys think of that maybe you just want to include in the description of this video or in the comment section. Okay. So the first thing is, one, acknowledge Marxism for the danger it is. We have to acknowledge that right now, and one only need to look at what's going on right now to realize that it is a danger. We have had, whether it's corporate entities, whether it's political entities, you even have some folks who call themselves conservatives who are bending a knee to these ideals and these ideologies, right? They're hoping that they can placate the mob. They're hoping that they can placate them, and so that maybe they'll just leave them alone. Well, one only need look at what's going on in Chicago, in Seattle, and in Portland, where the mobs, even though the mayors there have totally placated, totally let them get away with complete and utter anarchy, the mob is still attacking them, showing up and protesting at their homes, still fighting against them. Right? So it's important to understand. We need to understand and recognize the danger that it is, because it is a very real danger and it's having a very real effect on public policy right now. The second thing we need to do is we need to call it out wherever it is revealed. And I realize it seems kind of divisive to call something Marxist, but it is important to point out when we see Marxism, right? It's important to point it out. We need folks to know and understand. And just realize this. It's important not to call things that are not Marxism. It's important not to call them Marxism if it's not, in fact, Marxism, all right? Not every liberal is a Marxist, all right? That leads me to my next point. Not every liberal is a Marxist. Some of them are well-meaning liberals who value the idea of debate, of conversation with folks from the other side. Once again, it seems like today it's hard to find those individuals because they seem to have been taken over by the mob. But trust me, those folks exist. And a great example of that, look at the recent upheaval that's taken place at the New York Times, where because an editor dared to share a commentary by a conservative Republican, basically mentioning we need some rule of law in some of these cities that are out of control. They ran him out on a rail. They had him fired, and then you had other people who just had to leave, right? Who had to leave because they realized that it was not about discussion. It was not about debate. It was about one perspective, and one perspective will rule. And here's the thing, folks, and this is what these liberals need to realize and understand. They need to understand that once they've rooted out all conservatives, they're going to root you out too, Mr. and Mrs. Liberal, because you dare defend the system that they believe needs to be destroyed. And that leads to the next one. Treat liberals as the loyal opposition instead of the enemy. And I will be the first to tell you, I'm one that can sometimes be guilty of this. It is hard to fight hate and vitriol with love. It is. It just is. There are times when I've been called names. There are times when I know each of you have been called names that are in some cases unspeakable. Our president has been called all sorts of evil names and evil things in the name of Marxism. But folks, I'm telling you, the number one thing we need to do is that there are people, liberals, who do love this country, and who are not hell bent on the idea of destroying our way of life. Who are not hell bent on. Now they may be wrong. But they're not our enemy. They are the loyal opposition, and we have to make sure that those folks know that that we need them to fight with us, and they need to know that there's an opportunity to fight with us against the Marxists. Those who are sincerely, or those who are masquerading as liberals, but who are sincerely hell-bent on trying to destroy our way of life. We have to help those liberals uncover Marxists in their midst. And that's what we have to help them do. And we can't do that if we're calling them names as well. Yes, I get it. They're wrong. They're wrong on a lot of these policy issues, but I'd like to be in a position where we can debate, right? I'd like to be in a position, because if Marxists have their way, there is no system. There is no room for debate. Because see, under Marxism, there is no multi-party system, right? There isn't. Under Marxism, there's one party, there's one perspective, and anyone else is silenced, right? And in many cases, and in most cases, that silence comes about through death, right? They're either imprisoned or they're killed. So I know that's not a direction that we want to go. That's not a place that we want to be. But if Marxists are successful, the ones who are trying to overthrow our current form of government, they're successful, it's kind of where it's going to go. All right, and finally, empower those who speak the truth about Marxism. I don't care if they're center right or they're center left. If people are speaking out against Marxism, we need to make sure that people hear them. In particular, for us, if they're people who are center left, it's important for us to make sure that those people are heard as well, because those are the people that probably have the greatest likelihood of getting people, other people who are center left to listen, right? One of the things I've done in advocating on behalf of the Second Amendment is I've worked with people, I've worked with the right of the right, and I've worked with the left of the left. And there were many times that it was working on an issue with, for example, like the ACLU or with the LGBTQ community, who was advocating on behalf of the Second Amendment, or Democrats for gun rights, Democratic gun owners. Oftentimes getting someone who was on the other side of the aisle to speak to their constituencies actually could have an impact. Now, I put it to you this way. The things that we agree on, we can fight passionately together. The things we disagree on, we will fight passionately separately. But it's important to understand that, folks, this is not just an ideological fight. This is a fight for our very form of government, our very way of life. All right? And it's important that everyone who believes that America is the greatest nation on this earth and wants to preserve what we have, preserve our political tradition, anyone who wants to preserve that, those are the people that we need to be working with when it comes to fighting against these Marxists. I realize that this is kind of kind of comes across as, once again, black helicopters, alarmist type of a CRATV. But understand this, and I'll say it because I said it from the very beginning. Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Folks, if we do not recognize what is taking place, and we do not recognize that what is happening today with the anti-racism, the anti-discrimination, because, by the way, it has nothing to do with racism and has nothing to do with discrimination. With the BLM, that has nothing to do with Black Lives Matter. It has everything to do with overthrowing the greatest political, the greatest economic, the greatest cultural society this world has ever seen. And there are those who simply want to overthrow it, who want to tear it all down. And the problem is this, and this is where Marxism ultimately fails, right? Because Marxists believe that there's always going to be an oppressor and an oppressed. That's what they believe. Well, once they've torn it all down, right, someone is going to take charge. Someone is going to be in charge. Someone this is their own ideology. Someone is going to be the oppressed. Someone is going to be the oppressor. And in their eyes, as they hope to take charge, they don't believe that they're going to be the oppressor. But I challenge you. Name one, just one. Name one Marxist government, one Marxist regime where the oppressor, where they became the oppressor, that it didn't end in ruins. I'll just leave you with that. Anyway, folks, that's going to be it for this edition of CRATV. We very much appreciate you tuning in. We appreciate you liking and sharing this program, telling your friends about the California Republican Party. We are the conscience, about the California Republican Assembly. We are the conscience of the Republican Party. We'll talk to you again real soon.